Hello, hello, hello. It's Stephanie here. Welcome aboard episode 80 of the Rent to Rent Success podcast. We have a property rock star in the house today, someone who's achieving so much so young. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by Anthony Obomanu. He's a self-made property entrepreneur, qualified chartered accountant. But the thing that I love most about Anthony is he decided that he was going to retire at 40. And he decided that at the age of 22, people did not believe him, but he did it. And what we're going to talk about today is how he started from the bottom, now he's here, and how you can do it too. So it's going to be an incredible conversation. It's not about rent to rent this time. It's about property investment, the HMO strategy. I know you're going to love it and get so much out of it. So welcome to the show, Anthony.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for having me on today.
Well, we were just saying before we started rolling that we've been in touch for about 5 years, just on and off messaging and watching each other from a distance.
Yeah.
But for people who don't know you and are meeting you today for the first time, can you tell us a bit more about you?
Yeah, sure. So, my background is banking. So after graduating from university, I started my career in banking. And to be honest, it didn't take too long before I became sort of disillusioned with the whole corporate life and what have you. But my struggle at the time was finding something to do to replace that in terms of income. It took me a while to get there, but I started, buying property. Started buying sort of single vanilla buy-to-lets. My main logic at that time was, well, if I buy a house now, that house will probably double in value in 7 to 8 years. So it makes sense to buy as many as possible now, right? That was a no-brainer for me. So I embarked on the journey. I started buying, I bought my first property in Dagenham, sort of Essex way. And then shortly after, I started aggressively buying in the Midlands and in the Northwest, Bolton in particular, and Birmingham. So once the equity built up in the northern portfolios, 1 or 2 I liquidated and transferred that money to London and started buying flats in London, whereby after sort of 8-9 years of ownership of the apartments, I decided to sort of realize the capital equity, and I reinvested all that equity into houses, which enabled me to pursue the HMO strategy, which then allowed me to leave work permanently in 2018, literally 3 years ago. And then now I'm in a fortunate position whereby, my lifestyle's completely changed purely because of what I've done through property and the fact that I started early enough.
Because you're a don, basically. That's what we're saying here. So I just want to go back a little bit and take it a little bit more slowly, because what do you think it was that made you at the age of 22 just decide, I'm going to retire by the age of 40? Can you remember what you were thinking and why you were thinking that?
I thought, for me, I actually visualized. I said to myself, it's not going to be hard if you plan and use your money wisely. Because you got to remember, I was working in banking and it's quite well paid. There's 2 ways you can look at that. You can look at it and say, okay, yes, I'm in banking, great, I'm going to rest on my laurels. Or you can say, well, this is not going to be forever, and you start now putting your money to use. So I just looked ahead, saw that it was quite easy to get mortgages at the time. You didn't need that much of a huge deposit to buy.
What year was that?
That would have been 2003, maybe 2004.
And you were in London as well. Oh, sorry, the first one was in Dagenham, is that right?
Yeah, Dagenham, sort of east of London. Yeah. So I bought it was a 2-bedroom apartment. So and back then it was they were given 100% mortgages. So my only initial outlay was the legal fees, which was I think £1,200 at the time. So it was a no-brainer, and not many people were doing it. I just couldn't understand why people weren't doing this.
Yeah.
So,
And how did you know to do it? Because most people are not doing it because they've got no idea that you can do it. And if they did, they would be just too worried about doing it. So what do you think made you so up for it?
That stemmed from, because straight after university, I went back home and I said to myself, there's no way I will leave my mother's house to go and rent. So I'll stay put. 3 years had passed and I realized my life wasn't changing. So I said to myself, I need to buy a house, done some research and realized that they were giving out 100% mortgages. I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like. So once I researched and investigated, literally, as long as I think you're earning X amount times an income multiple of 4 to 5, then you could quite comfortably buy a property under £100,000 back then in London. So all I needed was to be in a job earning £25,000 for enabling me to get a mortgage. And so I got that job. That was the first thing. I literally just got the job to get the mortgage. In that sense, I was very strategic in terms of my my career. Yes, some people go to the 9 to 5 and will aim for that promotion. I was always aiming for the financial promotion to allow me to elevate outside of work. So that was the key for me. So it was continued chess moves throughout. So
I love that insight. You wanted the financial promotion. You wanted that next pay rise so that you could elevate yourself outside of work. And that's so important, because one of the things I say is that we all have this flow of money. You just mentioned there a salary, £25,000. That's the average UK salary. So in 10 years, everybody has, or most people who are watching or listening to this, has more than the £250,000 going through their hands.
Sure.
And then people will say, well, taxes. Well, yes, but what about the rest? And what are you doing? But you were harnessing every pound as a soldier, and you were investing them into properties. So you started off with that first one in Dagenham.
Yeah.
And tell us what happened from there.
So that first one in Dagenham, I actually lived in that property. That was my residential. And then within 2-3 months of moving into the Dagenham property, I remortgaged that. My broker, he actually guided me. He said to me, you do realize that, because prices were really escalating at the time, he said, you do realize you can probably refinance this property and go again. Most people would be scared or would not like to, that strategy. But for me, I was like, okay, let's do this. So I was able to sort of remortgage, and about, I think 4 months later, I think I took out £25,000, and that enabled me to buy property number 2 in Birmingham this time. Don't ask me why I chose Birmingham. For me, it was easy. Flat came up and I just purchased it. So there was not much thinking for me. As long as it made money, made profit, I was buying it.
There's sort of a debate about buying close to home or buying further afield. Can you talk about the sourcing of the property? I mean, how did you find it? Did you just find it online? Did you find it through a sourcer? And what made you think, I can go for Birmingham?
Cheaper, the barriers of entry was a lot easier, lower cost. So my mode of research at the time was purely calling agents, ringing up, getting the numbers. So I knew roughly, if I knew how much a property was or how much properties are going for in that area, I could calculate the mortgage cost. So now it's just left to find out what's the rental potential in that given area. So if they're telling me the rental potential is £600 a month and the mortgage is £150, for me, that's £500 profit each month. It was a no-brainer. I just purchased it. I didn't think twice about it. I didn't procrastinate. No hesitation. I just went on and done it. I didn't really tell people. My family, I didn't really tell my family, because my family, well, they were like, "What are you doing? It's too risky." But I just couldn't understand why it was risky, because if it's making me money, why is it risky? It's probably more risky if I didn't do anything. So I started aggressively pursuing the northern part of the country, and it got to a point where I purchased 4 flats within, I think, 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I said I was aggressive because the cost of entry was so low. I had a car at the time, and I sold the car I had, and realized it wasn't really giving me any cash flow. It's just a liability. So the money I made from that car, I purchased a house in Bolton, and that house I still got today. And the way I look at it, that house has been cash flowing me, positive cash flow for the last 15 years. That car is on scrap metal now. So
that's another important point that you're making there. The way to grow wealthy is to buy assets, not liabilities. In the first instance, until your assets are cash flowing, and then you can use the cash flow to buy the liabilities.
Definitely, my mindset was, well, I don't deserve to buy luxuries. I can only buy it if the asset's going to buy it for me, or if the asset's going to pay for it. That's been my thinking from day one. So, if I wanted to buy, I don't know, a car and it's costing me £200 a month, no way am I going to pay for that £200 a month out of my own earned income from work. The assets, I'd rather use the money to buy the asset and let the cash flow take care of that liability. That's been my thinking from day one. So
I love how forward thinking you were. Now, people will be listening to this and they'll be quite rightly saying to themselves, oh, well, that was okay for you in 2003, 2004 and beyond. You can't do 100% mortgages now. But I just want to give a bit of insight, which is that there are opportunities right now that won't be available in 10 and 15 and 20 years time, that people will be talking about in 10 and 15, 20 years time, saying, remember back in 2021 when we could do this that we can't do now. So I just want you to ask yourself the question, what opportunities are open to you right now that you could take, that in 10, 15 and so on years time, you could be sitting where Anthony's sitting and talking about how those assets have grown for you. So I'd love you to say a little bit more. So I think we're up to about half a dozen properties now in all different locations. I've picked up on Dagenham, Bolton and Birmingham so far.
Correct, yeah.
Where did you go from there?
Back to London. So, once I had once the Northern portfolio was, formed, it now enabled me to be a bit more strategic and focused on the London market, because I had the equity in my Northern portfolio to do that. So once I sort of bought my second property in London, in London, the capital appreciation is crazy. So for me, it was it was a no-brainer. And you buy one property, and I believe when you buy a property, look at it as giving birth to another property. So that one property now should give you capital to buy property number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and it's like a family tree. That's how I viewed it. And also my sort of philosophy at the time was, I may not be realizing that financial benefit now, but I know in the future it's going to give me options. And for me, it's all about the options. I'd rather have options in 7 years, 8 years time as a result of the decisions I was making on day one, as opposed to getting to 10 years down the road and not having no options. Then you're strangled. There's no flexibility. So for me, it was all about having financial options for the future.
Yeah. No, I love that. So what do you think is the X factor? You were 22. It's unusual to have that, not only desire and the ambition, but also the implementation to do it from a standing start. What do you think made you different, and that you've now got this large portfolio, including lots of HMOs in London?
I think my upbringing, the environment. From when I was a kid, I grew up on a housing estate. Not many opportunities, not much money, so that shapes you. That puts the hunger and the fire in your belly. So even from from the age of 10, 11, I was doing car washing, milk rounds, paper round. I invested, I remember, £200 on a mountain bike so I could do my paper round, knowing that the money from the paper round would pay back the bike over time. So that was my thinking at an early age. And you can't be taught that. You can't be taught that. So yeah, it's definitely the environment. Knowing that I wanted to provide for my mother, growing up, for example. Yeah. So, but again, when you're a child, you don't really know what lays ahead, or you're literally working from raw hunger. And I was focused as a child, to be honest with you. It was innate. So yeah. So I hope that answered your question in that respect.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
What I'd like to ask you now is, there's always challenges in any journey, because it can be good to look back and say, wow, it's been so easy for Anthony. But I just want to talk about, because obviously you're quite highly leveraged, because you've refinanced out to buy new properties and so on. And you started in 2003, 2004. We all know about the crash, the recession of 2008. So tell us about that time and getting through that. How did that impact you?
Yeah, good question. 2008, it was challenging. I was contracting at the time, and there was no contracts. The banks weren't hiring. So I was out of work for 6 or 7 months. Some people may think that's nothing, but at the time, it felt like a lifetime. And my savings was dwindling, but I had income coming from my sort of buy-to-lets that it's keeping me going. And I quickly realized, I said to myself, wow, never again will I be in this position where I felt vulnerable. So I stopped buying. I wasn't buying any property around that time. So there was a period between 2008 and 2014 whereby I didn't buy anything because the banks weren't really lending. A lot of my cash flow had been depleted. So I was literally rebuilding that cash flow from work because, when after the credit crisis, the credit crunch, the contracting market picked up again. And I made a promise to myself I was going to be very aggressive with regards to what I was going to do with my income going forward. I said, God forbid, the next crash that comes typically in the next 7 to 10 years, I don't want to be in a position where I'm feeling vulnerable to corporate UK, for example. So then I realized long term that this is what I wanted to do full time. Then I did not realize, I didn't know about the HMO strategy. It was because of the credit crunch, I rented out my spare room in my flat at the time. And then when the person moved out, I actually said to myself, well, if I can make, I think I was charging, I don't know, I can't remember what I was charging, but if I can make this amount from the spare room, what can I make in a house? And if I provided them facilities, I started thinking. And then in 2015, there was no one was talking about HMO. They existed, but it was the old school landlords that have been doing it for the last 20 years. They're the ones who were doing old school HMO. There was nothing, it wasn't like it's today on social media where everyone's, talking about HMO and posting their videos. So literally I started from a blank canvas, done the sums on, the first property I purchased, myself organically. And I quickly realized there was money to be made from this. So I was at work and I was just doodling on my spreadsheet at work. And I said to myself, how many rooms do I need to be financially free? How many rooms? Calculated. And I just put the plan into motion by liquidating my portfolio and reinvesting the money, the equity into the HMO. And for me, it was a no-brainer. And I was quite aggressive. So I went through a period whereby between 2015 and 2021, in 6 years, I built up my whole HMO portfolio in southeast London. So I could have left work a lot earlier actually, but before I left work, I wanted to buy my residential home, my house. So I just wanted to, line all my ducks. So when I done that, when I bought the house, within 10 months, I was in a position to leave work permanently. So, by me buying a house for myself, at least that was a monkey off my back. I didn't have to worry about that anymore when I was leaving work. So everything was all lined up and executed to perfection, really.
Yeah. And tell us about HMOs, because obviously you've gone into that strategy because it's a cash flow strategy. You were in it in the early days when not many people were in it, and perhaps the regulations were different than they are now. But tell us, what are your biggest learnings from as an HMO investor in London in the last, I think you said six-ish years investing?
6 years.
In HMO.
I've learned so much because the first HMO I've done, my builder and myself, we did not know about HMOs. It was the blind leading the blind, but we quickly learned. And when I say we quickly learned, so for example, the first HMO had I'd done 6 rooms, 2 rooms in a loft, and I think it was maybe 3 bathrooms. And 2 rooms were sharing 1 bedroom. I realized that was a mistake. And when I say I realized that was a mistake, I learned from tenant feedback when they come to viewings and what have you. I quickly realized no one was taking either room in a loft because it was too small. My thinking at the time was cash flow. But so for the second property, I decided to go for quality of space as opposed to cramming. Because a lot of people, a lot of landlords will do 7 or 8. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't work because what you find is it may work initially when it's all brand new and shiny, but when people start to move out and you're trying to re-let one of the rooms, one of the first questions tenants ask is how many other people are living in this house? So when you start saying you've got 6 or 7, it's going to put them off. So I just went for the space approach, and it worked. Every room has its own ensuite. Now, typically, I have 4 kitchens that are independent of the rooms. So 3 rooms will have access to their own private kitchen, and then 2 rooms will share a kitchen. So in essence, I've got 3 studios, and then 2 rooms sharing a kitchen, and then you can.
Wow.
Um,
That is a demarcator. This is when I said to you, I've got to have you on the podcast, because I've not heard anyone talking about this strategy before with the separate kitchens, because that sounds like it would be quite a big investment, adding the separate kitchens. But tell us about what made you go down that separate kitchen route.
Purely, again, you have to listen to your customers. You know, it's all very. I believe, you know, there's no point in charging a high premium for a room if you're not gonna innovate. You know, the HMO journey is all about, you know, evolution. So the first question I ask myself is, how can I continuously improve the product offering? So what I realized, when you're advertising your own property, tenants will call you, and the first question they will ask is it a studio? Will I have my own kitchen? And that was my light bulb moment, you know. So I said to myself, the next property I buy, the layout has to be conducive to allow me to design 4 kitchens, for example. You know, because so, and you can charge studio prices. So where you'd have a typical 12 square meter bedroom, you could command 750, 850 typically for ensuite. If you now give them access to their own kitchen, you're now commanding £1,000, 1,100. So that's the difference. Yeah, that's the difference, just by tweaking a design.
So it's an additional, that surprised me actually, 250 to 350 per room with their own kitchen, aka like a studio.
Correct.
And the cost of installing the separate kitchen, give us a ballpark on that.
Typically, the cost of, and I'm talking about plumbing, electrics, you're probably looking about £4,000.
Wow. Yeah. So that really works then with those numbers.
Yeah.
And also it just means that it works for so many other things, because your voids are going to be low, the type of tenants you can attract, all of those other things that make your life easier.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I want to move on to now is, do you self-manage or do you use an agent?
So, so I literally self-manage. I use an agent purely to find me the tenant. That's all. So I still look for the tenants myself, but also the agent. So whoever gets there first, basically. Some people say that's a lot of hard work. I would beg to differ. I say no, it's not hard work, because you've got a good product. It literally, it takes care of itself, and you've got good quality tenants. Yes, you do get calls, whether it's a leak, which is fine. I've got a maintenance man for that. But by and large, the HMOs run themselves. During COVID, that was my busiest period, because typically in any given year, I might have 2 to 3 tenants moving out. Normal. But in COVID, I had 16 tenants. Yeah. But in saying that, I was replacing them quicker than they were leaving, which showed that, and that which proved to me how robust my product is. Yes, I was busy with tenant checkouts and check-ins, but to be honest, this is what I do now. This is my full-time role. So for me, it was fine. It was manageable. It's not a 9 to 5 whereby I'm at the office for 10 hours, you know, so it's manageable. And now things have quietened down and things are quite smooth again.
No, I just love it so much, this whole have your own kitchen. Here's your own kitchen, or you're sharing a kitchen with one other person. I mean, that is phenomenal. And I know I've seen some of your developments before and afters, and they just look so good, Anthony. You've got such a good eye and attention to detail. So are there any other tips that you would give anybody, either they may be developing their own HMOs that they've purchased, or they might be trying to improve their rent to rents? What are the tips that you've noticed, apart from the kitchens, that really add that X factor for tenants?
Your communication style. So respect your tenants, because one thing I've noticed, if you have a good relationship with your tenants, they will respect you and they won't mess you around. And I always say it's no coincidence that during COVID, no one messed me around. It's no coincidence. It's no coincidence for my 6-year HMO journey, I've had no arrears. No coincidence at all. So, and if there, where there has been issues, a tenant will call me and say, "Oh, the rent's gonna be 1 day late," and I'm like, "Whew." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever," So they do, they respect you. But then again, for me, a top tip is your tenant selection. take your time to do your due diligence on each tenant. I always joke with my tenants saying, you've done, if you've got a room with me, you've done well, because I'm quite anal and I'm quite particular in what I look for. And not every landlord is like that. Hence, you get certain landlords that have the same problems over and over again. They take shortcuts. They get blinded by what's on offer in terms of the money and forget the softer side of things. So definitely your communication style with the tenants and, the relationship style is very important. And always, for me, always build quality into your thought process. Don't try and cut corners, because that will come back.
Yeah, no, I agree so much on the service. I think people appreciate that so much, and it just puts you head and shoulders above the competition, because so many agents are just so poor in what they offer.
I see it.
So, Anthony, as we've talked, I've been so impressed by your mindset, your ambition, your vision from such a young age, and the way that you handle yourself. And I'd love to know what mentor or person has had the biggest impact on you in doing the things that you've done.
I haven't had a mentor. I've not had a mentor. What I would say to you is, my good friend Simon, who I met at university, his mother, because I used to watch his mother after university, and she would go on these courses and hotel rooms and talk property, and I would go along. I'd be invited, and I'd just sit there in a room not knowing what they're talking about, but it was quite interesting seeing people interact and what have you. So she got my juices flowing in that respect. I don't know what I'm about to say now. Every Tom, Dick and Harry says this, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad, when I read that book for the first time, it was a real eye-opener. It really unlocked my mindset, and that's the key in this. It's the mindset. You could be working in McDonald's, or you can be working as a cleaner or whatever. You can still do the same thing. It's all about what you do with your money. That's the name of the game. What you do with your money and your mindset. And reading that book, it actually unlocked my mind. It taught me about buying income generating units. So when I mentioned earlier about selling my car, that idea came from me reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I thought, this car, if I can sell it and get £5,000, that's a deposit up north. It was a no-brainer for me. It was a no-brainer. So that was the biggest influence at the beginning. And then in terms of now, I think I get inspired by other people too. Whether I'm on YouTube and listening to a particular speaker, listening to other people's journeys too, it stimulates my mind. So when I was at work, I would get so excited listening to a YouTube video or podcast on someone who's broken free of the rat race, for example. I would listen to what they've done, how they've literally disciplined their lifestyle to achieve their end goal. So so I had no direct mentor. I wish I had a mentor, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've had a lot of different mentors. You've taken inspiration from people around you. You've learned the lessons of looking at life and the way people live it. And you've chosen and you've focused and you've had that vision, but you've kept on track. And so I would love to know, as we're coming into the close of today, you have achieved what you set out to achieve at the age of 22. And we're now in 2021. The world has changed in so many ways. What opportunities are you seeking out in the year ahead? I'd love to know what's exciting you now.
Yeah, well, good question. So at the end of last year, I actually said to myself, I'm taking 2021 off in terms of no projects. I'm taking a breather. Literally, it's been non-stop for 6 years, back to back with projects, and it's exhausting. Chasing builders, and although I love my builders, I just needed a break from them. But so I said, I made a conscious decision to spend more time on myself, more time with family. COVID taught me that, more time with friends, and just to do the things in life that I haven't even considered. And I'm at that stage whereby now, literally, I'm enjoying what life has to offer. I'm doing new things. At the same time, I still got my eye on the next project. I'm rebuilding the hunger, the appetite. So I've got my eye on a few things for next year. I've now started. I've got a government sort of link whereby I'm now offering traineeship programs to youngsters between the age of 19 and 24 nationwide. The government pay you for this, by the way, between 19 and 24. So it's an opportunity for them to learn about my business, the accounting, the finance, the legals, the regulation. So it's an opportunity to give them experience too. And I'm going to help them with their CVs. So all of that, it fills me with great joy knowing that I can actually help people in a positive way. And it's all remote. So, so it's fantastic. So this is an opportunity that came about by luck, purely because someone knew what I was doing and asked me if this is something, I would like to be involved in. And I realized now, yes, property is my main gig, but now it's all about what's coming out of that now. The other opportunities, like the consultancy I do for people. I help people with their HMO designs, discussions. So all of that, I love. So now I'm just monetizing my experience. And so, for me, it's a great place to be at. I'm actually at a place whereby, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. When I was working 9 to 5, I wasn't enjoying it. The motivation was zero. I said to myself, this can't be life. And now, to be honest with you, I've got time. I dictate my own life, and for me, that's the most important thing. I wake up in the morning and decide what to do, whether it's going to the gym, taking my mother out for lunch. It's just things that would not necessarily have done or had time to do. So, life is a lot more slower now. So whereas before, when you're going at 100 miles an hour, time is flying by. So, so opportunities going forward. I want to continue down the residential route. Something that I love, something that I'm good at. It's often people say to me, "Why don't you do conversions?" And when I look at the numbers behind conversions, whether I'm building 9 flats, the numbers aren't too different from HMOs. Especially when if you look at the model I've been deploying in terms of refinancing, the money you take out tax-free. Yes, it's a bit less than what you would do, what you'd make if you sold a conversion, but there's no tax to pay when you're refinancing, and I get to keep my asset. I don't have to sell it like I would if I was selling, building 9 flats. I get to keep the asset, and I get the longevity of the capital growth, and I get immediate income, which I can then reinvest into other asset classes, whether it be stocks, shares or cryptocurrency. Which for me now, it's a good place. It's a good place to be at. So I'm now looking at other opportunities outside of property.
That's amazing. So you've got a business model that works, and you can just turn the handle. So to go into a whole new sphere, you've got to start learning again, and there are much higher risks. There's much more opportunity to lose money. But whereas when you're cranking the handle on the system that you know how to do, it's easy for you. The first one obviously had a lot of challenges. Now, when you're doing it, or before you had a year off, when you were doing it, you knew what to do. Your team knows what to do. You know how to make it work. So it's an efficient way to make money. What I just want to pull out for people is 2 things. People may want to work with you on a consultancy basis for your assistance on HMOs, so that they don't have to go through all the mistakes that you went through the very first time, and they can learn from your lessons. So how can people contact you if they would like your help?
You can contact me directly on LinkedIn under my name, Anthony Obomanu. It's Obomanu. You can get in contact that way. I've got an Instagram site which is going through some changes, but the name now is Hobart _ HMO, and that's subject to change. But for those who want advice, just reach out to me, and I'll be happy to talk to you over the phone, or we can have a Zoom meeting. It's not a problem, and I can invite people down to my sites. What I've done, and I've got a good track record there of live work.
And the other thing is, if people are 19 to 24, or if they have people that they know, maybe children or family members who might be interested in the mentorship or the apprenticeship that you mentioned, how can they find more about that?
Again, just contact me directly on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to discuss the options then.
Brilliant. Well, it's just been such a pleasure and a thrill to have you on the show. It's been great to chat to you, and I just want to thank you for your generosity and sharing all your learnings. Well, we got the tip of the iceberg of some of your learnings over the last few years. Anthony, is there anything you'd like to say that if people are just thinking of getting started, but not sure about what to do or whether to take the plunge, what would you say to them?
My advice would be action. Start now. Never be scared of making money. Don't be too scared to secure your financial future and your children's financial future. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to learn. And more importantly, understand yourself and let your understanding of yourself direct your strategy going forward. Because you know what it's like, Stephanie. There's so many different property strategies. It's not for everyone. HMO suits me because that's what I like. Conversions may not suit me. Rent to rent may not suit me, but it will suit you. So understand yourself and what ticks, what lights your fire. Basically, don't copy other people, because just because Joe Blogs down the road has made money on a particular strategy, it doesn't mean you're going to make the same amount of money. You've got to find what suits you, and that's what people I notice struggle with. So yes, do your research, do your reading. There's plenty of information out there, and just go for it. Take action. Don't delay, because you will regret it in 5 to 10 years time. And you don't want to be that person that says, "Oh, what if only." Yeah, just go for it. Life is short. Just go for it.
So thank you, Anthony, for joining us. Thank you for watching and listening today. As Anthony said, just go for it and get started with your plan. Many of you listening are already experienced investors. Some of you are on the verge of getting started. So make sure you take the next step. So until next week, have a great rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer. See you soon. Bye for now.